I'm drawing 5 lines to represent a musical staff, but I'm allowing those shapes to take a more natural form. I'm letting them curve like the leaves on a flower. I've done a few examples of this process, and in the beginning I really remained true to the horizontal lines of the staff, but as I've become more comfortable with the process, it allows space for a higher level of abstraction. This is why it is good to repeat a process, because each time you become more comfortable and more experimental. It allows for a deeper exploration of the things that you're looking at. At this stage, I'm just working with warm colours. When a canvas contains all warm colours, it isn't unbalanced because it's the extreme, and that creates a particular kind of effect. Although a lack of variation in colour would need to be balanced by a larger variation in another area, such as a large variation in the level of detail. However, that's not the direction that I want to go in right now. I want to add some cool colours, but when I do, this image is going to ask for more. When the colour is completely warm or cold, it doesn't seem unbalanced, but the moment you move it away from that extreme position, it begins to seem unbalanced. I've added some blue and it immediately makes the image seem unbalanced. The balance is weighted more heavily towards warm colours, and there needs to be a greater balance between the two. When I add more blue, the piece has a more balanced composition. However, that yellow in the centre, it seems to upset the balance. It makes it seem dull. I like its shape and structure, but as the colours change, it seems more and more out of place. The natural complement to the colour yellow is the colour purple. I could balance it by adding light purple abstract forms to the image, although this image is already very busy. If I add too much, it might make it seem cluttered and chaotic. My other option is to remove the yellow from the image. I've chosen to add a very light blue with a strong white centre. This way I'm continuing to use colours that are already on the canvas. I'm not adding anything new. There are places where these shapes are white, but white has a special position when it comes to colour. It enhances all colours and can add space to any image. It's a bit like the places where a melody rests before beginning again. White is very much like those pauses. Everything is enhanced by a moment of space. All the colours seem more striking because of the presence of white. We want to look at the image and turn it into a piece of sheet music. The first thing we do is look for the things it has in common with sheet music. Sheet music has 5 horizontal lines, that is the staff on a piece of sheet music. This image also has 5 lines. Both of these abstract shapes have 5 lines that are grouped together. We could see this as our musical staff, but at this stage we don't have any notes. Notes are just circles on the musical staff. So I've added some circles in those areas. I've placed them along the curvy line that travels over this abstract musical staff. It now has more in common with a musical score, and because of this, it should be possible to play it. Let's take all the things it has in common with a musical score and then turn it into a musical score. The 5 lines appear on both, and both have circles, so we have staff lines and notes. The image already says where to put the circles on this musical staff. I didn't put any notes in this bar because that's the place in the image where one musical staff ends and the other begins. The image doesn't say anything about the length of the notes or what key signature to use. However, when we look at the things it doesn't say, there we find space for creativity. We can make creative choices about the direction the music should take. Let's listen to what we would have if we just played what was indicated by the image. It doesn't have any variation in the length of each note because that information isn't in our initial image. So we have the space to be creative and make those decisions. I've not changed the placement of the notes on the lines. They are still in the same place. I've just made some of them longer or shorter, and I've added some brief pauses in the music to make it more like a melody. Let's listen to it. Now it has those variations. The melody really comes alive when there is a variation of note lengths. The initial piece of artwork gave us no indication of what key signature to use or what the bass line or chords should be. The melody hints in different directions, but there isn't a rigid suggestion. The initial image gave us a starting point, but then it also gave us lots of space to create. At this stage, we have the beginning of something. Let's create another image that we can use as a starting point. I wanted 5 lines that we could use as our musical staff. If the lines were horizontal, it would be simple, but I've chosen to swirl these lines. You need to add complexity in order to create something interesting. This image is part of a series that are also portraits of loved ones, and I find aspects of their personality joining the process. This is a portrait of a child. That child is someone who brings interesting, magical chaos to my life. The process for this piece contains some of that energy. You're adding difficulty and challenge, and then you're working with it to find a point of calm and harmony. Aspects of the person connects to different parts of the process. At this stage, I'm adding some abstract shapes in the negative space. I want the blue detail to stretch to the edge of the canvas. I'm not worried about creating too much detail because I know that it is balanced by the simplicity of the colour scheme. When you have a simple, limited range of colours, you can add a larger amount of complexity in another area of the composition. Simplicity in colours becomes balanced due to the complexity in the detail. I've added orange to the image, and this is the complementary colour to blue, so they work really well together. It is still only 2 colours, so it still has the simplicity that allows for a high level of detail. The work still has a balanced composition, I've also added more variation in light and shade. The blue is no longer flat, I've given it more variation. Variation has a key role in this process, whether it's varying the note length or varying the amount of light and shade. It is these variations that make the art and the music more interesting. I've removed the colour and added red circles to represent the notes, but I question where to begin. Which red circle is our first note? These shapes are abstracted into a spiral. The edge of the spiral could be the first note, or it could be the notes in the centre. There is also the question of what is up and what is down. These are creative choices, and they are also practical decisions. If up is relative to my position, then as the shape turns, what could have been a top note would now be a bottom note. Using spirals in this way does make things more complicated. Because of this, I've decided that the centre of the image is the bottom of our music score. So when I'm converting it into sheet music, I'm sometimes rotating the picture. I'll show you. The notes are separated into small groups where the abstract line stops and starts. This means there is space between each group of notes. So let's look at them one group at a time. I've begun from the centre. If you look at where the circles are placed, you can see that I've used them to show me where to put the notes on the staff. We are starting from the middle of the spiral and moving to the edge. Let's look at that next cluster of notes. I've rotated the image so the centre is beneath our abstracted musical staff. This will allow us to see it more clearly. When you look at the notes, you might see my mistake. These three notes are repeated. They aren't repeated in the original image, and although I would have made changes later on, I wasn't planning on doing it at this stage. I've just been copying the notes, and I've made an error where I've copied the same three notes twice. At the time I did this, I probably didn't even notice. Sometimes you just have to let things go. As far as mistakes go, this isn't a problem. Repetition is an important aspect of music, and it's an important tool to use. I set up these projects for myself with particular things to look at and explore, but I sometimes find myself doing something different. Sometimes it's a mistake, and at other times it's intentional. This does hint at a different process that could be explored. You could include notes that are a repetition at this stage in the process. Like I said, repetition is a key aspect of making music. You could throw it in at different points and shake up the process. That would be another interesting way of working. Like all mistakes, this one has taught me something new. Mistakes are fantastic educators. Once you've learnt something, it ceases to be a mistake. Now, these notes are in the same place as the circles. I haven't included any repetition. The circles are in a specific position on those lines, and that is replicated on the sheet music. I've rotated the image so the notes we're looking at are above the centre of the image. It makes it easier to tell the top of the staff from the bottom of the staff. The spiral has made the process more challenging but also more interesting. The circles on the painting have told me exactly where to put the notes. I've rotated the image again so the centre is beneath our abstract musical staff. Once again, I've used the circles to tell me where to place the notes on the staff. We are now coming to our last cluster of circles and our last cluster of notes. I've used the circles to indicate where to place the notes, and now all the notes from the painting are now in the sheet music. Let's listen to how it sounds at this stage. Notice the pause between each group of notes. It needs more variation to become a melody. I've changed the length of each note and added more pauses. Let's hear how it sounds now. We can now take the melody that we got from the first image and the second and then combine them into a larger piece of music. I then went on to change the instruments and finish the track. Let's listen to the final version in Ableton Live.